while the country has some of the most polluted air in Europe.
Europe's single biggest emitter of carbon dioxide greenhouse gas, the gigantic Bełchatów coal power plant.
Nie będzie silnej polskiej gospodarki bez silnego górnictwa.
Polish government has reached a deal with trade unions to keep open mines which had been slated for the axe.
Several thousand coal miners in southern Poland have protested against a decision by their employer to shut down production for a week.
The 4 mines which had been scheduled for closure lost €192 million last year.
Śląsk jest ciągle bezdyskusyjnym skarbem Rzeczpospolitej. W ogóle bez dwóch zdań.
In late August 2023, state-owned PGE, Poland's largest energy producer, made a surprising announcement. It planned to become carbon neutral by 2040, a full decade earlier than it had previously declared. Even more strikingly, it said it would stop using coal, the country's dominant energy source, for electricity and heat production by 2030. The firm's plans aligned with the European Union's push towards a carbon-free future and reflected growing investor appetite for cleaner, more sustainable assets. But in Poland, they quickly sparked a political firestorm. The backlash came primarily from Silesia, the southern region that is the heart of Poland's coal industry. As PGE is the biggest buyer of thermal coal from Silesian mines, miners reacted to its announcement with fury. Who will Silesian mines sell coal to if PGE intends to move away from coal by 2030? Asked Bogusław Ziętek, leader of a major mining union, in an open letter to the then Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. The unions demanded not only that PGE abandon its new strategy, but also that the company's CEO, Wojciech Dąbrowski, be removed. But Dąbrowski kept his job, at least for a few more months. With national elections looming in October, the then ruling Law and Justice Peace Party had bigger concerns, staying in power. They failed. A new pro-European coalition led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk took office in December 2023, promising to accelerate Poland's long-delayed energy transformation. But more than 18 months later, progress has been slow. One key promise, to loosen restrictive laws on wind turbine construction, has stalled in Parliament. A short history of coal in Poland. Poland's reliance on coal stems from a mix of its geology, history, and economic legacy. The Energy Information Administration, a US state agency, estimated the country's coal reserves in 2023 at 31 billion short tons, or 27.8 billion tons, placing it second in the EU, behind only Germany, and 10th in the world. For centuries, hard coal has been mined in Silesia, powering homes, industry, and power plants. In central and western Poland, massive lignite brown coal operations fuel giants like the Bełchatów power station, Europe's largest emitter of CO2.
Dziś centralne obchody górniczego święta Barbórki.
Przy bełchatowskiej odkrywce Wojciech Jaruzelski było 9:50.
Coal dominance in Poland was cemented during the communist era, when it became the backbone of the economy. The state prioritized coal production not only to meet domestic needs, but also to earn hard currency through exports. In the 1970s, Poland was the second largest coal exporter in the world. This coal-driven model persisted well into the 1990s, outlasting similar sectors in Western Europe, where mines were closed due to the economic inefficiency. After the fall of communism and the beginning of the transformation towards a free market economy, heavy industries collapsed, cutting electricity demand. Though energy use later rebounded, coal consumption never returned to communist-era levels. Over the past 4 decades, annual domestic coal production has plummeted from 200 million tons to under 50 million tons a year, forcing Poland to import large volumes of coal despite its reserves. Yet, coal still accounts for roughly 57% of Poland's electricity production, more than in any other EU country. The decline in coal production has not been driven solely by the EU climate policy. Poland's coal industry has become increasingly uncompetitive, as miners have to dig ever deeper to retrieve it. Labor costs are rising and productivity is flattening. That has led to the cost of mining of coal in Poland to be among the highest in the world, at 900 zloty or $243 per ton of coal produced. By contrast, the figure is 148 zloty or just $40 per ton in the United States. Polish coal is surviving only with heavy public subsidies. In 2025, taxpayers will spend 9 billion zloty propping up the sector. That's about 600 zloty per household, or 10% of the country's annual personal income tax revenue, according to the news website Wysokie Napięcie. Yet, despite these economic signals, coal retains powerful political symbolism, making its phase-out as much as a cultural and political challenge as a technical one. It's little wonder Poland is the only EU country without an official date to leave coal once and for all. Why has Poland struggled to move away from coal? Poland's continued dependence on coal is not only about fulfilling energy needs, it is rooted in politics and the country's industrial legacy. Miners have long wielded influence in Poland, especially in Silesia. Their role in resisting the communist regime, most notably during the 1981 Wujek mine protests against the imposition of the martial law, where 9 miners were killed, earned them lasting national respect. According to state pollster CEBOS, 83% of Poles said in 2025 that they respect the mining profession, the same share as in 1987. In 2021, miners struck a deal with the peace government, allowing coal mining to continue until 2049, despite warnings that coal would likely be unviable long before then. Speaking during the signing of coal phase-out agreement, Jacek Sasin, the then state assets minister under peace, expressed regret at the decision. The conditions and framework set by the European Union's climate policy leave us with no choice but to move in this direction and seek alternatives to hard coal, he said, adding that mining is a vital pillar of the Poland's economy and an integral part of the region's identity. Yet, that agreement will likely need to be renegotiated on less favorable terms for the mining industry. Tobiasz Adamczewski, a vice president of energy think tank Forum Energii, told the Warsaw Wire that without a new deal, we are living in a world of fiction.
Where miners and politicians who want the miners' votes still might be thinking that there is some kind of future for coal, which is not true, or that it's cheap, which is also not true.
One of the biggest barriers to clean energy has been political inaction. Although the rhetoric of Poland's most recent governments has differed, PiS were more openly co-friendly, whereas the ruling coalition, at least during the election campaign, presented itself as more climate conscious, the results have been strikingly similar.
It's not necessarily that one government did a much better job than the other government. They were both quite slow to implement regulations. Poland is still lagging behind in terms of the rest of the European Union.
One such example is the so-called 10H rule introduced under peace, which halted almost all new onshore developments. They did later loosen the law a little bit, but not enough, according to experts. When the new government came to power, they pledged to quickly reverse the law, but they have delayed doing so far for over 18 months due to poor public communication and fear of a presidential veto from the opposition-aligned former president Andrzej Duda.
Just one thing to add, because since we recorded the video, Poland's parliament has approved finally the wind turbine bill. However, even with changes and amendments introduced in Senate, for example, not much has changed, Adam Czeski says.
It's just a waste of time, basically.
However, the bill is unlikely to even become a law. Poland's new president, Karol Nawrocki, who came to power supported by PiS, has already expressed his plans to veto it. During his campaign, he also pledged for Poland to continue mining coal, which he called a cheap energy source. This political tug-of-war, however, is nothing new.
Marcin Popkiewicz, in his book Zrozumieć transformację energetyczną, Understanding the Energy Transformation, bluntly observes that Polish politicians have been blocking the development of alternative energy sources for decades, regardless of their party. Popkiewicz notes that despite parties promising ambitious climate and environmental protection, winning a majority in 2023 elections, the government they formed later opposed some of the EU key measures, including the Nature Restoration Law, which aims to restore degraded ecosystems across the EU by 2050. He argues that the current ruling coalition is making a mistake by backing away from the climate commitments that in part help them defeat peace. The coalition will not get the votes of populists who support coal, timber plantations, and those inflating the climate crisis because they will vote for populist parties anyway, Popkiewicz warns. Additionally, years of neglecting the green transition are starting to have painful consequences for regular Poles. Under the EU emissions trading system, ETS, companies such as electricity producers have paid the state for emitting CO2 into the atmosphere. The proceeds, at least 50% under the law, were supposed to be used for energy transition projects. But although tens of billions in ETS revenues flowed into the state budget, Poland has the second highest emissions in the EU relative to its economy, they were not used to build zero-emission alternative. Not enough, at least. Now that the carbon costs are driving household energy bills, politicians are scrambling to deflect blame. When I hear statements from politicians, mining unionists, and energy company managers who seem shocked that the prices of carbon allowances translate into the costs of energy from burning coal, I feel like saying, "You idiots, you have known this for years." Popkiewicz writes, "We're in this mess of our own making after wasting precious time and a lot of money," he adds. Recent years, however, seen Poland accelerate its energy transition, especially following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Since 2020, the country has almost doubled the share of renewables in the energy mix, which last year stood at 29%. In April, Poland's monthly share of electricity generated by coal fell below 50% for the first time, marking an important milestone.
What are the costs of clinging to coal?
Coal is not just costly for Poland's economy. It is becoming a political trap. Over the next few years, coal will continue to dominate Poland's energy discourse, shaping electoral strategies and fueling culture wars around the EU's climate agenda. New opposition-aligned President Karol Nawrocki floated during his election campaign the idea of a referendum on whether to reject the EU's Green Deal. echoing demands that gained traction during the widespread farmers' protests across the EU in 2024, including in Poland. But as Popkiewicz points out, this is legally impossible. To do so would require rewriting dozens of directives and obtaining the agreement of most of the EU countries, an impossibility, he writes. Adding that the only path left for such fossil populism in Poland is withdrawing from the EU. Meanwhile, ETS2, a new EU carbon pricing scheme covering from 2027 emissions from buildings and transport on top of the existing ETS, is already proving politically sensitive. The scheme is designed to level the playing field. While municipal heating and electricity are already covered under ETS, many households that burn coal or gas directly have so far escaped those costs. Adamczewski argues that ETS2 introduces fairness. Whoever emits pays. But he acknowledges that the government has failed to prepare households for the changes. We subsidize people switching from coal boilers to gas boilers, he says, and both of these technologies will be a problem when ETS2 comes to play. With new parliamentary elections due to in 2027, some fear the Polish government might dilute or delay implementation of ETS2 to avoid political backlash and to prevent handing an advantage to PiS and far-right Confederation Party. But the cost is not just political. By dragging its feet on clean energy, Poland risks becoming less competitive.
The idea behind it was that you have the ETS revenues, you give it back to society through programs such as the Clean Air Program to refurbish your homes, so that you don't have to use a coal boiler anymore. And there was a devastating problem because we've been subsidizing as Poland, switching from coal boilers to coal boilers in the past. Then we've been subsidizing switching from coal boilers to gas boilers. And both of these technologies have will be a problem for if the ETS2 comes into play.
In 2023, companies like Google, Amazon, Mercedes, and IKEA all warned that the country's coal-heavy energy mix could deter future investment. Poland's thriving battery sector, which brings billions of zloty in export revenues, also stands to lose out if the EU implementation plans to calculate battery carbon footprint based on national energy mix is implemented. That move would make Polish-made batteries less competitive due to the country's coal-heavy electricity.
A coal-free future?
Despite political hesitation and delays, Poland's most recent draft of its updated National Energy and Climate Plan marks a significant turning point. The country, for the first time, has admitted that coal will become almost obsolete by 2035. The final version of the plan is still waiting to be formally submitted to Brussels, more than a year past the EU deadline. But the direction is clear. Adamczewski urges the government not to weaken the plan in its final form.
The energy market and society needs this investment pathway to be shown, to be accepted by the government, and to be laid out and to be implemented by public administration.
And despite the long road ahead, he remained optimistic. When the Warsaw Wire asked him if he believes in a coal-free Poland by 2035, he said,
it might even happen sooner. The economics look very much in favor of a quick change. And now it's all about making sure that local societies who have been living through coal, that they are taken care of and that there is a just transition.
That's it for today's episode. If you liked it, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you want to learn more about Poland's energy and business, see you in the next episode.